For the price of a cup of coffee, join my Patreon. The page includes audio documentaries not available on my YouTube channel. Link below in the description. Thanks for watching. In 1968, John Lennon lives in a Tudor mansion in Surrey. He spent twice the price of it doing it up and is fully aware if he sold it now he'd take a loss. John's hired a full-time housekeeper, gardener and chauffeur. He lives in the house with his wife Cynthia, their son Julian and their 5 cats. Cynthia does all the cooking and wonders whether it's necessary they own such a big house. She often worries about how they burn through money. She states, "Our food and drink bill is amazing. It's just soft drinks as we don't drink. It's mostly bread, tea, sugar, milk and cat food. Yet it somehow costs £120 a month. That's the equivalent to £2,138 in 2023. John admits he doesn't know how much money he has. He asked his accountant at one time and wrote down the number. He's since lost it and can't remember. John and Cynthia spend most of their time in the living room downstairs, eating, watching TV and lying on the sofa. The phone rings often but John never answers. He has an answer phone set up for messages to be left. No one can ever reach John on the phone. This evening the door knocks and John answers. 2 students introduce themselves and tell John they're selling magazines to fund their studies. John replies, "Very good. Come on then, what do you want me to do?" One of the boys hands John a list and tells him to choose which he'd like to read. John ticks so many the price comes to £75. He tells them to wait while he looks for some cash and hands them everything he has in the house, which is £50. The students accept the money, thank him and leave. Meanwhile, Cynthia is cooking dinner. She serves the meal at 6:30 p.m. She plates up a slice of melon, cold meats, mashed potatoes and cauliflower for herself, and the same for John minus the meat, as he's now a vegetarian. John drinks a glass of milk with his food and they sit watching the television as they eat. After dinner they put Julian to bed and John goes to the garden and comes back with a toolbox. Inside he keeps marijuana, tobacco and rolling papers. He figures if the police ever come to the house, it would be safe in the toolbox in the garden. Throughout the night they watch television, constantly switching the channel. No program stays on for longer than 10 minutes before it's changed. As he sits on the sofa, John states, "I'm pleased I made it young. Now I've got the rest of my life to do what I want." He goes on to say he's interested in a nirvana, a Buddhist heaven, stating, "I don't know much about it or understand it. George knows more." He also admits when the Beatles stopped touring, most days he didn't get out of bed until 3 in the afternoon. Cynthia says she's noticed a change in John, but he still doesn't communicate much. John admits this is true. Their chauffeur had done interviews saying he drove John around for hours and he never said one word to him. John talks about his dislike for small talk and says he thinks about communication, but putting it into words is pointless. He adds, "Talking is the lowest form of communication anyway. Music is much better. The Office in America say they listen to Sgt. Pepper over and over, so they know what we're thinking in London." John's friends note his temperament has changed over the years, stating he's now a calmer person. He's also noted as still being as generous as he ever was. His philosophy is, everyone can be successful if you tell yourself that enough times. He does admit you need the desire and the circumstances, but states it has nothing to do with talent. On the subject of talent, He says the only talent is believing you can do something. George refused to draw for a long time, always stating he couldn't do it. John and Paul kept on at him till he tried. Now he draws all the time. John goes on to say he's never conscious of being a Beatle, stating, "I'm not famous, I'm just me." He adds that he forgets he's famous until someone approaches him acting strange. Then he remembers, "Oh yeah, I'm a Beatle." He talks about how he misses being able to go out unrecognised, stating, "It would be so nice to be completely forgotten." John got on a London bus with Ringo recently to see what would happen. They were recognised and someone phoned the Apple offices saying a woman reported seeing them. John denied it was them. He didn't want the hassle from the newspapers. Of all the Beatles, John sees Ringo the most, maybe because he lives just round the corner. They never make arrangements, John just turns up. Of all the Beatles, John is the most dependent on the others. He can't go long without seeing them. He states, "We do need each other a lot." John tells of an idea that he and Cynthia were going to take his caravan to India to live in. His chauffeur would tow them along in his Rolls Royce. Another idea was to live on an island he purchased just off Wales. Dorinish was purchased a year previous, but John can't remember where it is. Cynthia admits had she never got pregnant, her and John would never have married. She states, "I would have stuck at the art college and probably became a teacher." She goes on to say their child is the only thing that kept them together. It was fate, and John believes in fate. Cynthia says she often floats around ideas with John dismissing them. Then later Ringo will mention the same things and John will be enthusiastic. Cynthia mentions going away just her, John and Julian without the Beatles around. John doesn't like the sound of the idea and states, "But it's nice to have your mates around." Cynthia points out the other Beatles need him less than he needs them. She gives an example stating, "George went off to Los Angeles just with Patty. He didn't get everyone else to go with him." John then states, "I did try to go my own way after we stopped touring, but it didn't work. Seeing them made me feel normal again." At this time in his life, it seems nothing could separate John from the Beatles, though he has begun talking with a Japanese artist named Yoko Ono.